neighbor was miserable because she was waiting and waiting and waiting for her daughter, who was getting older, and then she passed 30, was waiting and waiting for her to get married. And then a few months ago, at the age of 35, my neighbor's daughter finally got married. So I went to the wedding, and I was so happy to see, like, the daughter was so happy, and it looks like she found, like, this wonderful, wonderful husband, and looked very, very happy together. And what was interesting was that the day after the wedding, I saw my neighbor. I expected her to be so happy. And it was interesting because the mother didn't look happy. And she said to me, and all that she could talk about was, she was saying, you know, I don't know what I'm going to do now. My daughter, you know, she's always lived like a few blocks away from me. And now she's going to be moving outside of Jerusalem. I'm never going to see her. And she was really miserable. And she stayed miserable. So I'm sharing this story because I think it's a very typical story. My teacher, Harabbanit Yemima Mizrahi, my mentor, she always says that women, that our natural state is to be in a state of waiting. Women are always waiting for something. We're always waiting for the happiness which we think is just lying right beyond the horizon. You know, first of all, and in the beginning, then we're waiting to get married. We think, well, happiness will come when I get married. And then we think, you know, once we get married, we think, you know, I'll be happy when I get pregnant. And then once we're pregnant, we think, well, I'll be happier when the misery of pregnancy is over and I give birth. And then once we give birth, then we think, well, I'll be happy, you know, when my husband changes, when my children change, when I move to a bigger house, when I finally make Aliyah to Israel. We think that happiness will finally come when, you know, when the thing that we're waiting for finally arrives. But my teacher, Rabbanit Yemima, she always says that she's a person who's like counseled, you know, tens of thousands of women, and she says that in the vast majority of cases, the happiness does not come. She says that when you get that thing, the woman who's been waiting and waiting and waiting to get married, and she's been miserable, and she expects happiness to come, it doesn't happen then. That happiness doesn't come when you reach the thing, when you reach that point right beyond the horizon. Rabbi Yemima teaches that she says that the greatest challenge of women is to live up to our name. The name of the first mother was Chava, Eve, was called Chava, which in Hebrew means, to translate it means to experience, to be living in the present. She says our main challenge as women is to choose to be happy now. To choose to be happy in our imperfect situation, even though we're waiting, we're always waiting, women are always waiting for something, even though we're waiting, to choose happiness today. This week I was reading a wonderful book that I highly recommend called Dear Daughter, and in it, then there's a wonderful metaphor. It's a metaphor about marriage, but I think that it can apply to all situations of waiting for, you know, this elusive happiness right over the horizon. So the writer says that marriage is like a new pair of shoes. When you buy a new pair of shoes, and you're sure that you got the right size of shoes, then we expect a certain amount of blisters and a certain amount of pinching, and we know that if you put up with the pinching and the discomfort, that after a few days or weeks, that those shoes are going to be really comfortable. You're going to grow into them. But if you're a little bit nervous that you got the wrong size, you think maybe you got a little bit too small. So then the pinching and the blisters, it will be unbearable. And you'll take them off right away and say, this is the wrong pair of shoes. I wasn't supposed to have these shoes, and you'll bring them right back to the shoe store. And the same is true, he says, the author says, of marriage. You know, if in your marriage, then you're sure I married my soulmate. You know, there are difficulties, but I married my beshert. This is the husband that God wants me to have. So then, you know, even if there's arguments and difficulties and tensions, you put up with it because you know, this is what God wants me to be going through right now. This is the husband that God wants me to struggle with to reach my most perfect self. These are the challenges that I'm supposed to be dealing with right now. But if, in the back of your mind, then you're thinking, you know, well, maybe I married the wrong guy. Maybe I should have married that guy that, you know, I went out with in 7th grade. Why didn't I marry him? He was so much nicer than my husband. If you're thinking that way and you're doubting that you got the wrong size shoes you think you got the wrong husband, then the discomforts and the frustrations, they'll be unbearable. The same is true with life, with all of this waiting. If you're waiting and waiting. I got a letter this week. She's waiting and waiting and waiting to get pregnant, and she already has a few kids, but she's been waiting to get pregnant. And I think that there's a tendency in this situation, when we're waiting, to think, at this point, I'm waiting. God has forgotten about me. God has turned his back on me. If God remembered me, then I would get pregnant. If God remembered me, then my husband would change, my children would change, I'd be able to make Aliyah to Israel now. And the thing is that, the truth is, what we're supposed to do is see God's presence in every situation. See the gift in every situation. Try and say, in every situation, God knows what's best for me. I'm not getting pregnant right now. God knows what's best for me. I'm not I'm not able to make Aliyah to Israel right now. God knows what's best for me. My husband's driving me crazy. My children are driving me crazy. My mother-in-law is driving me crazy. I would be happy if only they could be more normal. If I could move to a bigger house. It's not true. God gives you the situation right now, and we have a choice. We have a choice to see God in the situation or not. So I want to bless all of us, that we should live up to the name of the first mother, Chava, and that all of us should choose happiness now and for always. And I bless everyone with an amazing week.